And the biggest problem that our industry's got, and people like us who talk about social media as if it's magic, is the fact that when we go in and we take people's money, is we're just not obvious about the fact that it does have limitations. So what we try and do, as every other good agency or consultancy should do as well, is really tell them what we can do, which is trust and recommendation. And this really goes back, it's quite interesting in a geeky way. It goes back to what PR used to be about, which is just understanding a little bit more about how people interact with media. So we just do a lot of analysis beforehand, and that's the main difference between what we do and traditional PR companies do. And when I say we, I don't just mean us. There's a handful, I would say, of PR companies, small PR companies. We're medium size. In America and in the UK, which are changing slowly the way in which, and taking business, I think it's fair to say, of traditional PR companies because of the fact that we're adopting this different way of working with clients. So how do we do it? So PR companies, if anyone's got any experience of PR, I hope this rings true, would usually give a press release to someone or give them some news. Now the trouble is, and this is something which we were wrestling with for years, about 5 years ago as an industry, PR is not about journalist relations anymore. It's about influencer relations. And when we talk about influencers, basically we mean anyone with a significant following online. And they're not necessarily interested in press releases. So what we try to do is just find out what they are interested in. But inevitably, it's not a piece of paper. It's what we call assets. And these can be anything from JPEGs through to widgets, through to even smaller bits of information like sentences which no one else knows about yet, so trivia. And what we try and do is just map it on to essentially the most influential part of your consumer's network, which is what this slide illustrates. Is anyone, by the way, familiar with the technographic ladder from Forrester? Sounds a bit geeky, I know. But essentially, this is the most definitive way, I think it's fair to say, that not just our industry, but including the advertising industry, any marketing industry has come up with in terms of analyzing the way people work online. So I'm not from Forrester, so I've just basically, obviously, stolen their work to a certain extent. But what you've got is you've got people that read at the bottom on the internet, just read stuff. And at the top, you've got people who create stuff. So it makes incredible sense for a marketing program to target the people at the top. It's just far more efficient, because if they're talking about your brand, then it'll be read, and the ratio is incredibly something like a 99-to-1 ratio. So if one person creates something, 99 people are supposed to read it, even if it's just a sentence. And that's kind of a ubiquitous statistic which goes across the internet. I'll be happy to talk about later. So this is what happens. Every one of the marketing disciplines that you should be talking to, if you ever do, depending on if it's this industry or any, should be just focused on these people who create stuff. And what you do is you just make sure that they're the most powerful people that you could possibly target, because you don't have an infinite amount of money. So you want to spend your X thousand dollars making sure you reach the most amount of people. And within the creators, what you got, sorry, it's a bit London. What you've got is you've got people who people want to understand about what they think about a particular topic, because they're almost specialists, like, for example, tech journalists. On your left, the authorities. You've also got popular people. That's like the BBC, broadcast journalists. But you've also now got collaborative people, who essentially are the people who have less of a following, but are more powerful when they talk about a particular service. So, the main difference between the way in which PR people work now and the way they worked before is this collaborator element. Now, when we talk about collaborators, it's quite difficult, because they don't have, and this is being brutally honest, don't have the audience size of a particular PR campaign. So the only way in which you'd actually want to use these collaborators within a marketing campaign is if your company has a unique selling point, because without that, then you can't coalesce opinion around a particular point that differentiates you away from your competition. The other point that I wanted to make was the fact that whenever we go in and talk to big clients, or any marketing person talks about social media, they, of course, as I did at the beginning, talk about buzzwords like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. But the problem is that there's a litany of brands out there which have just thought, this would be a good idea. I'll just go ahead and just start it up. Like Domino's, for example, with their Twitter feed. Now, the trouble with that is that when you're engaging with an audience, after about 3 or 4 months, and you set their expectations, essentially like a drumbeat of updates, they become disillusioned after a while with the brand. So it is something that one has to consider before entering into opening up an official profile. But to be brutally honest with you, we work with big and small brands, and even the smallest brands have someone who has a marketing function who finds it within their capacity to update the Twitter profile at least once a week, which is enough to keep people satisfied and grow organically the numbers associated with an official profile. So if there's one message that I wanted to convey, is the fact that there really is no excuse for not doing social media in its official capacity from your company. There's been a lot of debate over the last 3 or 4 years as to, whether it's something which is damaging if not treated right. How transparent should I be? The rules are quite clear, especially in Europe. You can't be disingenuous. Otherwise, you do something called astroturfing, which is actually something that is punitive, i.e., you'll get sued. So there's nothing that isn't known now about social media and marketing. So what we've got is an example of work we've done, but again, obviously, it's now something which has been emulated by other brands for Sony. So they had a problem, and forgive me, obviously, this isn't obviously direct relation to your industry, but they had a problem, which is that they had a product which they wanted to launch in Europe after it was launched in Japan. And it was a product which was more orientated towards style rather than function. So we worked with many other creative agencies, and which is quite unusual that they turned to PR in the end to try and do a job for them. And what we came up with is we identified people on Facebook called the / generation, essentially the cool kids in skinny jeans with bright T-shirts, who all have multiple jobs, hence the term. But they also have multiple online profiles. And we loaned them this particular dancing egg, and asked them to make up a couple of minutes video, just use it as a muse. So they gave us the video back. We loaded it up onto all of the video sharing websites and onto the profiles which we've got for Sony. And in terms of what people thought about it, instead of them thinking this is slightly overpriced, they thought because of the cumulative effect, the underground groundswell of people saying this is cool, that when it got to the tech journalists, the authorities, they said, yeah, this is what the kids are doing. So if you like, it was marketing in reverse. It was starting at the ripples at the end, which normally you generate from a hard launch, and using it to address a problem. Then they sold quite a lot of them as a consequence.